Hello everybody, it's Pam Chambers here from British Sugar, Technical Support Manager, and I'm going to share with you some slides regarding weed control in sugar beet and what we've been seeing in our trials during 2025. First of all, I'm going to share with you some information on what's happening in Europe and the possible implications for us here in GB. We'll take a look at the British Sugar large-scale weed control demonstration at Yaxley in Suffolk. Then two BBRO trials, one on the Lincolnshire Heath and the other on the Norfolk Breckland. A few slides on resistance. Then emerging weeds that are occurring across the arable rotation, not just in sugar beet. And then to finish on a positive note, we'll look at the new Corteva active. So, plant protection products, things to be aware of. PFAS, that's also known as forever chemicals, which you may have heard about. They occur in a lot of different things in our everyday life, apart from things like sewage, sludge, biosolids, and of course plant protection products. Denmark recently banned a number of actives, so it will be 2025 will be the last year of use for some of these actives for Danish growers. And with regards to sugar beet herbicides, fluazifop P-butyl fusilade max was one of those. There are also some insecticides and fungicides that are implicated. So we need to keep a watching brief on that. With regard to the EU reset, there's been a lot of talk about that in the media recently, and it could happen as soon as 2027. We don't know, but plant protection products are on their agenda. And I think, as you will all be aware, triflusulfuron methyl, debut, Sharo, was not renewed for use in Europe. And so it could mean that we lose that active sooner than what we thought here in GP if we go with European rules. So I would advise that if you do use triflusulfuron methyl a lot in your weed control programs, take a look at some other actives and also what we're doing with BBRO trials at programs that don't include this. Fenmedifam is also an active that is at risk of non-renewal within Europe and possibly GB. We don't know. It's been going through the process for a number of years now. There was a dossier released by EFSA in November 25, and now it's a waiting game until Fenmedifam appears on the agenda of SCOFAF meeting, where member states will then vote whether it will be renewal or non-renewal. There is some noise in the background of Article 4.7, that's a derogation that allows a member state to approve a pesticide under exceptional circumstances, and so information is being gathered to support that, but that often does happen. So I don't again want to set any red herrings running there. It's a matter of watching this space, and I would expect in 2026 we should perhaps be more informed as what is going to happen. But again, if with the EU reset we may be following what the decisions are that are made in the EU. Right, moving on to the integrated weed control trial at Yaxley in Suffolk, and that was the second year that this took place. We took over a large field here, nice and flat and even, and it was drilled with a smart variety that allowed us to use conventional and ALS chemistry. And we were looking at overall spraying, band spraying, tractor hoeing, and thank you to Lemkin for the use of their kit and support there, and also looking at the eco-robotics, which comes from a Swiss company. For those of you who don't know what the eco-robotics is, this is a short little clip here of it in action at Yaxley in Suffolk. Over 156 nozzles, spot spraying. We've took the skirt off so you can actually see those. Normally it's on, and it means that you can spray in quite windy conditions here, and it's moving at about 7 kilometers per hour, and quite a useful piece of kit. But it is expensive. But a number of vegetable horticultural growers now have one. I think there's probably about 20 in the UK being used, and some of them are moving this onto sugar beet. This slide looks at some of the treatments that we used at Yaxley and the costings. So we was applying conventional chemistry here, fenmethyl-fumicate, metametron and oil, putting it through the band sprayer or the Bateman sprayer. And as you can see, differences in cost there. With the Bateman, it was coming out at about 119 for the 3 sprays, and for the band sprayer, around 45. We also included Conviso 1 application, and that costed out at 65 or 26 when going through the band sprayer. Now, just a word of caution here, in those costs, I have not included the cost of the seed. So there is obviously a difference. If you haven't got weed beat, you don't need to use the smart variety. You do have to factor in the cost of that seed. Looking at our eco results, we had 2 applications and we was using about 11 litres per hectare, which is quite low considering with the Bateman we were applying about 100 litres per hectare, and that resulted in a cost of around about £23.75. But I'll explain in a minute why we have to treat those results from the eco with caution. It's always good to look at photographs, I think, and it gives you a visual experience of what we were seeing, and it highlights a little bit better than graphs. So the untreated, quite a high number of fat hen there. Just about commercially acceptable. I know some of you will have had quite a problem from fat hen burden this season. In the conventional, we did very well on this site, controlling the fat hen with just 3 sprays that I mentioned earlier. So that has done a really good job. And the Conviso 1 was also excellent. With the eco, as you can see there, we've got quite a few weeds left. Now, what happened? The first spray worked very well. The second one, we'd arranged for a group of farmers and agronomists to come and have a look at it in action. And we also had to fit in with when the eco was available. Unfortunately, that coincided with a wet day, but we still went. But obviously, that meant we didn't get the best out of the herbicide. Conventional band spraying and hoeing, Conviso band spraying and hoeing, both gave good results. Hoeing left rather more weeds behind than I would have liked. With the band spraying and hoeing, we're obviously going to be travelling at a slower rate than overall spraying, and so our costs will go up. And also, you can't always hoe when you want to. Last year we had a few issues with it being too wet and being able to hoe. We certainly wouldn't have got round a large acreage. And other years it can be too hard to hoe. So I see hoeing as fitting in as part of the conventional system if you have got a hoe. But you also, when you're doing all your budgeting, have to take into account the costs of some of this kit. Whether it be the band sprayer, hoe or the eco, etc. You need to factor that in. Closer look at what we saw from the eco robotics. As I said, the first pass did a brilliant job. You can see from that photograph there, I think, that we had variable emergence like a lot of people did. So some big plants here and some smaller ones. But the eco was picking up where the weeds were quite easily and doing a very effective level of control. But that obviously didn't happen on the second application, but it definitely is worth looking at a bit further, hopefully in 2026. Another use for the eco robotics off-site now, we're just going to another field where they had a large problem with the common burdock. You can see that here. Within the field, you can perhaps see, just pick out where it was, so quite a burden of it, and it would be very competitive with the beet. The eco was set to spray anything over a set size, so avoiding spraying the beet, and then it was able to control the burdock. So that was a good use of that there. I'm now going to move on to annual broadleaf weed trials, so the BBRO ones at Navenby and Brettenham. Up at Navenby, again, a lovely site there, nice and flat and even, and a little bit of detail there about the soil type, and then also the timings that we used. We had 16 treatments in these BBRO trials, and I think you'll be relieved to know I'm not going to go through every treatment in this presentation, but it will be available in a report of later on in 2025 or early 26. Dominant weed here was black bindweed, which a lot of growers experienced. And you'll notice there 11-day interval between the T1 and the T2. That was a bit more than what I would have liked, but we had Easter falling in there and so couldn't get the sprays on exactly when we needed. But even so, we got some good control of the bindweed. That's an overall picture of the site with some lovely fluffy white clouds there. And you can just pick out, I think, our trial pegs along here and also all the weeds. That is mainly black bindweed. And a close up here of the untreated. The beet is struggling, and it just shows you how important weed control is in sugar beet. If we didn't take the weeds out, we wouldn't have a crop. And then the best treatment on this site was fenmedifam, ethofumazate, metametron, applied 3 times with an adjuvant oil, phase 2 at half a litre. And then on the second and third timings, we popped some Lenasil in at 0.2 and 0.4 of a litre. And we ended up with really good clean crops. Any weed that was left behind were late germinating ones which wouldn't impact on yield. What I would say is that here we didn't have any clopyralid on site, and clopyralid can be useful on bindweed as well, and it could be an alternative option to the Lenasil being in the mix. This is a spray diary for those of you who are interested in looking at the temperatures, cloud cover and crop growth stages of the applications. So there's a summary there. And then we move on to some results for black bindweed. The first 4 are not commercially acceptable. Those of you who've seen some of this work before will realise we put these treatments in so we can just pull out the strengths and weaknesses of the actives. And you can see here that as soon as we look at the mixes, the mixes on the end, the ethofenmedifam and metametron, we're getting pretty good control of the black bindweed. I think some of the things that went wrong this year on farm were probably 2 larger intervals and also possibly 2 lower rates earlier on. The beet and the weeds waxed up really quickly, and so if you didn't put sufficient active on, you were not doing enough to kill the weeds and they were recovering. Looking at active used, spray intervals and rates was quite important, but also making sure you didn't finish spraying too early. Here we go again, some more photographs. Look at the 3 ethophumazates, a lot of weeds there. We've got black bindweed, knotgrass, field pansy, etc. in there. And then that mix again at the end, which did a really good job. So now moving over to Brettenham in Norfolk, not far from where I live, and that's a completely different site. It was basically a nightmare. We had drought, wind blow, bird damage, and at one point we wondered if we should continue with the trial. We'd got 16 programs, and some of those mixes I knew were going to be quite hard on the crop, but we decided to continue. So we've got a 13-day interval between the first T1 and T2. That is longer than usual. And then in a commercial situation, it would have been tighter, but we would have gone with kinder chemistry. We didn't have that luxury here. We had a lot of programs that we had to put on. Well, look at the level of fat hen. That was astounding. And here we've got some senior members of the British Sugar Agricultural team playing peekaboo in the fat hen. No prizes for guessing who they are, but it was brilliant to get them out to see some of the problems that you growers and agronomists and us doing the trials actually experience when we're actually doing the work in the field, especially this year with controlling weeds. And this is an overall drone photograph courtesy of Martin Cox from Blackthorn Arable. And we was going to take this trial to yield. That was the initial plan. But you can see if, for instance, we'd have taken this plot to yield, we would have had the impact of the fat hen either side of that impacting on the yield, because all of this green is fat hen. So in the end, we couldn't yield it, but we did get some useful data from it. But you can see from here how some plots obviously got a lot better control than others, but also we have some gaps, which is an issue from, as I say, the drought and the wind blow in particular early on and bird damage. The field diary again for those who are interested, given the timings and air and soil temperatures, etc. And then we look at a graph of total weed control, but basically most of it was fat hen. I've chosen in this graph the same treatments as what we looked at Navenby, just for some consistency. And look at the weed burden here, 162 fat N per metre squared, and we've only managed to reduce it down to 42.3 here with that fen-etho-metametron Lenasil mix. So why didn't we do better? Well, we've basically stopped too early. Those of you who came up and looked at the trial will see that we were getting very good control of the fat hen, excellent control actually, but the crop was so open that we then got later germination of the fat hen coming through. We didn't make a distinction when we was doing the weed counts between cotyledon and established plants. So I'm fairly confident that if we'd have done another spray, we would have been at acceptable levels of that fat hen. And we also had Conviso 1 on this trial, and that did very well, exceptionally well actually, with the residual component there. And you'll see that the difference here between total weeds and fat hen, it's basically the fat hen that's left behind. And that's again because we had an open crop and there was later emerging weeds. So if we'd have done a further spray, we would have then, I think, got on top of it. So looking at this, what do you take away from it? Well, main thing is that with the Conviso 1, a holding spray was useful. You needed another spray afterwards to follow up. Same with the conventional, you needed another spray in there. And also costings, you need to take into account the cost of seed spraying as well, not just the chemical. And here's the cost for the conventional spraying. And you'll see if we go whizzing down right to the bottom here that the one with the Lenasil in costed around about £128 a hectare, so around about the £130 a hectare, and that was sufficient to give us good control at Navenby. That's all we required. At Brettenham, that would have been obviously a bit more, because I said we would have needed another spray in there. All of them treatments had phase 2 at half a litre, and we costed that in. Apart from the Conviso 1 didn't have the oil in, but this year I would have said, well, it did, where we did put oil in on farm, it gave better control of the weeds. So in a season like we've just had, with very dry conditions, adding an oil into the Conviso 1 will help with that. Right, what about ALS resistance? So we started noticing problems in 2023, and that's mainly, I guess, because up until 2020, we didn't have Conviso 1. We had Debut, which is ALS chemistry, but it was always used in tank mix with other actives. So it was only 23 when we started to see problems with chickweed and poppy. That led to a project starting with BBRO, British Sugar and ADAS, where we can actually take small leaf samples from the field at any time of the year, and we can then extract DNA from that and actually with sequencing look and see if there's any mutations there and whether we've actually got resistance, or if the poor control is down not to resistance but to something else that's happening, i.e. timing of herbicides, the way the herbicides are being applied, etc. So turnaround time 7 to 10 days, and will be very useful for us to use in the future. This is a set of results from 2025 looking at poppy. Looks complicated, but what we've got down here is basically 20 fields. And then what we're looking at is what the ALS gene is looking like. On the wild types, we need to look for all peas. If we've got any mutations, when we look at our samples, we'll see a red showing up with a different protein. So we've got field 1, we took a leaf, some leaves, and then we did 10 readings, 10 sequencing, and we could see on this first one that 9 readings showed that we'd got a resistance gene. So that would not, that poppy in that field would not be controlled by an ALS chemistry, whether it be Conviso 1 or something else elsewhere in the rotation. If we go down to sample 11, we can see there from our 10 readings that we've got, they're all the wild type, and they're all going to be susceptible to ALS chemistry, so no problem. So that's in a very brief summary and quite a simple summary. There will be more information on this going forward. What about emerging weeds? Well, this one is velvet leaf, and I'd never seen this in the UK before. I'd seen it abroad. It's not a native for us, and the first instance of it in 2025 was Tim Martin here, an agronomist, sent me through some pictures, these two pictures here, saying, what is this plant? And then we went out to the field. This is Sam Telling, British Sugar Ag Manager, and Libby Alexander from BBRO, and we had a look at this velvet leaf. And then a few weeks later, I found one in a field near me in Suffolk. It can be controlled with the new chemistry coming along from Corteva. Another weed that's increasing is barnyard grass. Again, Clethodim will do something on this. Conviso 1 will. I would suggest that you try and stop it getting hold in fields where you're going to have sugar beet. It can be very difficult, and it can grow very big and quite huge. Any of you have seen it. It's quite a large plant when it gets established. So try and reduce the amount of plants that you get in that sugar beet crop. Take it out with glyphosate if you can, else in the stubble, or as I say, if you do have it in the beet, Clethodim is useful, e.g. Centurion Max, or Conviso 1. Amaranthus retroflexus, pigweed, that's been around quite a while now. It's not a native here, it's been around quite a while, and that can be a problem on some fields. And unfortunately, there has been a confirmed resistance to Conviso 1 with this, not in the UK, but we need to look out for that. Useful actives, dimethanamide P coming along from BASF as a straight EC formulation, can be useful on amaranthus, has not yet emerged, so include that in your mix, and these other actives here that I've listed. The important thing is not to let it get established and true leaves. And we do get different sorts of amaranthus. We were hoping to get some results off the break of our different programs, but the fat hen took over, so that meant we didn't get any reliable data for amaranthus control this year, but hopefully next year we might see something. Mugwort, that's another one that's causing an issue and increasing. Really would advise to try and get that out of the field before it gets established. That means hand pulling it, or possibly you could use the eco robotics like we saw earlier on with the common burdock, the spot spraying. It might be possible to take the mugwort out like that. In this photograph you can see it's quite curled over. It's had an application of triflusulfuron, clopyrrolid, but it's not going to kill it. All it's going to do is suppress it a bit and keep it down, but it's not going to control it. So watch for that one. Don't let it get established on your farm. Right, finishing with the new Corteva active on a positive note here. This is a slide from Corteva. It's an EC. They're hoping for registration for 27. Note the small amount that will be applied per hectare. 26 mils probably is the rate that you'll be going with. And it has good level of control on fat hen, fool's parsley, and annual mercury, which is another weed we haven't mentioned but can start to become a problem. I saw a field with quite high levels this year when doing the National Crop Survey. So we had it in the BBRO trials. We put it in as a straight, three applications to compare that with Fenmedifam. Obviously you won't do that commercially, always use it in a tank mix. And we then put it in with Metametron or Fenmedifam and ethofumazate. What we didn't do is include it in a mix with Lenasil. I would have quite liked to have seen that, and hopefully we'll include that for 2026. Here we look at the Fenmedifam 3 times on its own, and then the F78 3 times on its own. And that's mainly black bindweed control here at Navenby. Black bindweed was not thought to be one of this active strengths, but it does have some useful activity. When we put it in with Fen and Etho over there on the right, we've got pretty good levels of weed control, comparable to where we had done the Fen, Etho, Metametron and Lenasil. So that's why I said if we could put Lenasil in there as well, that would be interesting to see how it performed. Now, crop effects. I know some of you are have been concerned about that. This year, we were very careful with the amounts how we applied it, and it was only in treatment 9 that we saw any crop effects, and that's the sort of common effect you would see from an auxin type herbicide, the twist and thicken of the stem. But soon as we put it in mixed with other actives, we didn't pick up any crop effects at all. So that implies that in a tank mix, it is a synergistic effect with the other actives, probably acting as safeness. So in Europe, they have taken trials to yield, and where they've seen crop effects like this, and they've never picked up any yield impact. Right, moving over to Bretnam with fat hen control. As you can see here, we didn't get the levels down as low as we would have liked, because I went through this earlier on. That's the one where we looked at before with the fenmedifam, ethofumizate, metamethrin and lenasil. And these are the F78 applications. So really there needed to be a fourth spray going on these plots to get what I would say is commercially acceptable levels of weed control. But however, we did see that it is very useful on fat hen. It is one of its strengths, so it should form part of our program going forward. So in summary, the F78, it is safer in tank mix when used correctly, no crop phytotoxicity. So make sure when it does come to market, you use it as instructed. No double dosing or anything like that. Do be careful, and also use only supported tank mixes. It is actually weak on field pansy. We had a lot of field pansy in Navenby, and it didn't give very good control of that at all. So that is a weakness. Encouraging results on fat hen, and as I say, we need to do a bit more on tank mix and with that. And in Agrana research, that's Austrian equivalent to BBRO, they had very useful activity on velvet leaf and also fool's parsley. We will hopefully have a fool's parsley site for 2026. And as I said, we need to look at more tank mix options, and possibly not including fenmedifam and TSM. When we're looking at assessing mixes, just a reminder there, with clomazone, you can only use that pre-M, and the F78 is only post-M, so that would be a sequence, clomazone followed by F78. We can look at lenasil and clopyridid mixes just to see what we need to do regarding rates, timing and adjuvants. So that's a quick run through from me. It's been a very difficult year with weed control. I think we've all learned quite a lot, as we always do with weed trials. Any questions, please get in touch with the BBRO and they will pass them on to me, and I will do my best to answer them. There's also 2 videos that will be released on the BBRO website, one of the Navenby weed site and one of the Bretnam site. And I look forward to seeing you at Beat Tech 26. Thank you.